so I'm here to talk a bit about design and the future of design. So a few thoughts on this. First of all, design, us as practitioners, this is our life. But for a lot of people in the business world, design is kind of a new and exciting thing. So they've heard about it, they've read about it, and so on, and they want to learn more and get the most out of design. However, design is, as we know, not really a new thing. Design's been around for a while. And design has actually for decades, for centuries, helped shape culture and define culture. So design has been central to the creation of society and culture for a very long period of time. From my perspective, there's sort of three core ingredients to design. Whenever you do anything of significance, there's three things that you need to consider and three lenses that you need to bring to the picture to do something of significance and something that's transformational. And just where this comes from, so the first two ingredients, it's really the human. Of course, the individual and the human, but also technology. So technology and the human intersection of those has been central to design forever. So bottom right example there is some tools that gave humans an advantage in the world. And then humans also started to use technology to build amazing monuments. And in this country, we've had Shaka, the famous Zulu warrior, was innovating with technology and figuring out how to use and shape spears in a different way and the battlefield tactics and so on. So that sort of intersection of technology and human has been around for quite a while. Around the same time, similar time to Shaka, around here, we also saw the rise of the industrial age with organizations of the scale and reach and impact that hadn't been possible or seen anywhere in the world before. But that really changed things, and that essentially brought that third element, so human, technology, and then the organization to the picture. So what that gives us then is these three lenses that design always needs to consider when we want to do something of significance: human, technology, and organization. So if we take a quick look then at each of them. So the human, part of what's so amazing for me about being a designer in the design field is that unlike technology, and actually unlike some of those futuristic vision videos that show people in these squeaky clean environments living their perfect lives, people are actually living quite messy and fragmented lives and are idiosyncratic and have weird things like emotions. So that sort of makes design an ever-evolving and super interesting field to be in. In that intersection of human and technology, there's questions about, how much will technology do and what will be left for humans in terms of work. And certainly in this country with manufacturing and mining, you can see these lines sort of taking a dive down, are going down. The amount of time and the amount of money extracted for certain types of activities are being replaced by others. And it's quite well known that technology is actually better at doing stuff that humans used to do in terms of using their muscles. But now also technology is starting to replace some of the things, some of the cognitive things that people have been doing, certainly a lot of routine tasks and so on. So there's a lot of people kind of wondering about, so what about the human, and will there be jobs for humans in the future? And what will we do? And the optimist in me says, well, this is nothing new. We used to have people who stood in elevators or lifts and operated the lifts. We used to have people who did manual typesetting and so on and so forth. A few decades from now, people will talk about, we used to have people who sat in cars and had this round sort of wheel that they were steering in the car. So it's not a new thing that technology is starting to take over things from humans, and overall, if you look globally, there's no shortage of jobs. If you look at the organization, then this industrial age that I just mentioned actually had a profound impact on design, and design had a huge boost thanks to the industrial age. So you have a toaster on the right-hand side, and then you have the last car, the Fiat 500, the last car that was designed end-to-end by one person. So the amazing cars that we sit in and drive or are being driven in today are usually designed by many, many different teams. This 500 was designed by one person. Now, the industrial age brought around the need to design for uniformity, quality control, and so on. So you have essentially an industrial-style organization, and design was optimized for that. And part of what's interesting right now in terms of where design is going and where organizations are heading is that kind of hierarchical command structure where it's all about control is actually being turned upside down. You have a quote here by Klaus Schwab, who is the founder of the World Economic Forum, talking about how capitalism is actually superseded now by talentism, by innovation, by human talents and creativity. So increasingly what you see in organization is not the traditional hierarchical and very controlled structure, but self-empowered teams, a flat hierarchy, cross-functional, collaborative teams. So it's a real sort of reversal of that trend of the industrial age organization. And most companies are only just starting to wake up to this right now. But it's a real revolution and massive change. The other thing that's also happening is that you look at the companies that have the most momentum in the world today, most, if not all of them, actually have data and data insights at the very heart of the organization. So behind there you have a visual of some work we did for the UK police force. And it's really quite incredible how data knowledge and analytics and so on is increasingly powering organizations and setting them up to deliver better, more seamless solutions for people. The third ingredient, technology then. So we all know that technology is changing fast, so that's nothing new. Markets know that too. So markets see the incredible potential of technology, and in the last 5 to 10 years, the list of the most valuable companies has changed really dramatically. So you have the top 6 there. As of Monday, that's the market cap valuation of the most valuable companies in the world. So it's quite shocking, actually. If you had looked at this 10 or 20 years ago, this list, it's quite shocking to see that of the top 6, the 5 most valuable have technology very much at the heart. So markets are rewarding the potential behind technology. So why is technology changing fast? Why does it seem like those things that we dreamed about, self-driving cars, robotics, artificial intelligence, why is it that those things are kind of seem to appear all around the same time? The things that used to be in sci-fi movies now become actually embedded in the day-to-day. It's because of this. It's very simple. It's algorithmic cost reduction of technology that allows you to combine different technologies in novel and new ways, and therefore, with very little effort and very little cost, you can actually do quite remarkable things. Now, really important point, though, about technology is that while technology has the potential to change fast, humans don't. Humans don't change fast. So we don't develop new senses, we don't develop new cognitive abilities that fast. We don't change massively generation to generation. And if you think about what organizations are about, what business is about, and so on, it's there to serve society, to serve marketplaces, And all of those things, including organizations themselves, they're about people. So if you actually want to get the value and the benefit out of technology, we need to understand humans. So understanding humans and designing for the human is actually the only way that we can meaningfully release that incredible potential that's there in technology. So having said all of that, and those three lenses, are we having a good time? Are we having a good time in design right now? So good news is these guys love us. So, big business has fallen in love with design and is increasingly falling in love with design. That's great for anyone who's in the trade of design. It's really good news. And if you stop for a moment and look at the progress in the world, is it good or is it bad? Then, across a number of different super important parts of society, whether it's poverty, child mortality, and literacy, we're actually moving in the right direction. So with the help of technology, with the help of design, we're actually improving the world. And of course there's differences, and I'm not pretending that everyone has a great life and has great potential. But if you look at things globally, we're actually doing all right. Yet, Chicken McNuggets. Chicken McNuggets. So what I mean by that, on the left you see diverse, colorful, beautiful birds. On the right you have these sort of chicken-esque things meant to be fed to millions, bland, samey. And one of my fears, one of my concerns with design is that actually we are in a little bit of a sea of sameness. We created a bit of sea of sameness. So to illustrate that, web designs. Web designs, nowadays you go to a website on a big computer, what you get is a hero image and 3 columns of text underneath. Not 1, not 2, not 4, 3. That's the standard. Icons. Icons are all the same, and they're everywhere. And they're increasingly so samey that they've lost their meaning. So they're not meaningful anymore. It's more like visual bird poo on your screen or in your life. What about corporate identities then? Well, it seems like even things like corporate identities come only in 3 sort of boxes nowadays. So either you have the sober sans serif, the very respectable and clear and dependable sober sans serif, or you have the very approachable and human script. I'm Johnson & Johnson, and I love you, and you should love me. Or the yummy meatball. So those are the 3. And actually, the first column is winning out. So everything is gravitating towards that first column and the very sober sans serif. So the argument here is that with the help of digital tools and the expectation on fast producing great designs and so on, we're increasingly templatizing and stamping out these designs without much thought and without much creativity. And for me, it's actually quite interesting that 75 years ago, roughly, this guy, Alexei Brodwich, who was an iconic illustrator and designer at Harper's Bazaar during the sort of golden age of magazine design, really creative guy and so on, said this. He talked about boredom. And if he talked about boredom during that golden age of incredible visual creativity and so on in his job, then what would he say if he saw what we're producing today around the world? We also miss a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of time wasted in people's lives. There's a lot of frustration. I work a lot in digital, and while digital is bringing incredible potential, it also brings fragmentation and ugliness and confusion. Whether it's in the car that I drive or whether it's in the living room, it could be so much better. Sitting in a car and driving and sitting in a living room and being entertained and so on used to be very simple. And now, while there's more sophistication, there's also a lot more fragmentation, a lot more clutter. So what about the new designer, the designer of tomorrow? Where are we heading? So the future designer, from my perspective, is moving from designing for an individual to designing for different constituents, designing for businesses and organizations, designing for the employee, and crucially, designing also for society. This is some work we did for a bank here in this country, Stockfell, and for me it's an interesting intersection between the enterprise and society. The future designer, I think, is going to be dealing with a huge amount of complexity, and it's going to be amazing challenge to radically simplify without dumbing down that complexity. So we design not for just a few people, but increasingly for potentially billions. We design not point solutions, but systems. So what that means is that we don't design necessarily artifacts, but rule sets and systems, which is a very, very different thing to get your head around, and a little bit scary, actually, for some designers who like me, that like control and precision. And also, we have an incredible fusion, increasingly, of digital, on the one hand, and physical, on the other hand, experiences in people's lives. Personally, I think that the future designer is even more collaborative and diverse in terms of mindset and skills and background and so on than ever before. In his annual letter from the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates was talking about the difference between the human population in this continent compared to the US, and how there's going to be an incredible range and size of workforce coming on in South Africa and Africa more broadly over the next few decades. And your president was talking about this as well recently at the World Economic Forum, and setting up a range of different initiatives to drive innovation and technology. Personally, I don't think it's all about only STEM. I think it's about STEAM. So design and art, as in A as in art, STEAM. Design and art has a place as well and needs to be thought of as an integral part of the progress that we should see in this country. I think the designer has the obligation to ask the right questions in a time when increasingly we're questioning whether politicians and organizations and so on are really looking after our interests and the interests of society and communities and so on. I think the designer has a really important role to play in asking those questions about ethics, privacy, and so on. I think the future designer is going to harness technology for the benefit of humans. So what we have here is a really interesting example. So if you take a very well-trained human clinician, and you look at how much accuracy they have in the prediction of breast cancer, then 3.5% is the error rate in the diagnosis from a human who is highly trained in this. Artificial intelligence is a little bit behind, so they have a 7% error rate. But you smash them together, so you take the human and you take the machine, you smash them together, and you almost get rid of the errors. Really fantastic. So if you take that, you can apply that to almost any field. And you could have incredible potential when you actually augment the two rather than thinking of them as one against the other. I think the future designer will also be a dreamer and will imagine things. We're doing some super interesting work with Disney right now, reimagining the future of entertainment and movie creation. So that ability to use imagination and creativity to reshape things will be even more central. So to conclude here, 3 takeaways, 3 things to take away. So you as designers, we as designers, what do we need to focus on? First point is, make sure you're unhappy. Make sure you're frustrated. And think of that as moments when you can realize that there's something to improve. So on the left there we have Tony Fadell, and he famously said that his inspiration is frustration. Tony Fadell was the creator of the first iPod and then the iconic Nest device. Patricia Urquell is a really fantastic interior designer and furniture designer. And she's constantly iterating and looking for new inspiration and new things. She's completely unsatisfied all the time, always pushing for new things. So every good designer, Picasso is another good example, is hungry and wants to improve. And as Andy Grove, a really famous business leader, said, complacency breeds failure. Also, crucially, you do need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is that when you look at what actually brings progress and changes things in a good way that brings real innovation, it's not people going deeper into their area of comfort and knowledge, but actually when you smash things together or you work in this slightly adjacent possible. Be curious, explore, embrace new inputs, and so on. You look at big breakthroughs, whether it's private sector or public sector. What we have here as example is penicillin and the light bulb. They all come from that collaboration and from the adjacent possible. Stephen Johnson, if you want to read about this, you should read Stephen Johnson's book on the subject. It's really fascinating. But he talks about how change favors the connected mind. And lastly, my encouragement to you is to embrace hope, not fear. The hobby cat, the sailing boat there, bottom left, it might be in the harbor outside of town here. But that's my perfect analogy for design. It's a sailing boat. It's my favorite type of sailing boat. It has a big mast and big sail, so it goes super fast. It takes a small crew that needs to collaborate and be agile all the time. And it's inherently unstable. So it goes over easily, but you can get it back up again, and you can still be in the race. So whether you're the crew collaborating and working on that hobby cat, whether you're Rosa Parks on a bus trying to bring about change in the segregated US South in the 50s, or whether you're the crew on the Apollo 13 doomed spaceship, by collaborating and by embracing hope and not fear, you'll go further and you'll change the world in a positive way. Thank you.